Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Social Enterprise event. Tonight's event is in partnership with Textbook Ventures and Enactus University of Sydney and University of New South Wales. I'm Alaha, head of the events at Textbook Ventures, which is Sydney's premium community for supporting students in tech and startups. I'm here with my co-host, John.
Hi, everyone. So I'm John, like Alaha said. I'm the president of Enactus University of Sydney. We're a society that uses entrepreneurial action to create social enterprises. Enactus Sydney and UNSW really look to create these social enterprises through the members that are in each of our societies that create projects and then try to do good with them. And I'd like to introduce James as well, who will have the opportunity to speak. We'll be chatting to him. He's the general manager of Humanitix, about the ins and outs of building a social enterprise and how startups in tech can shape and help to build a better future. As a bit of background, Humanitix is an event ticketing platform. It's non-for-profit that looks to fund education projects for disadvantaged kids. The platform has been immensely successful and has earned the trust of thousands of well-known companies like Google, Canva, Atlassian, and TEDx to basically ticket their events, and has done a huge amount of social good.
Thanks, John. I'm pretty sure you guys are curious about the starting out of Humanitix. So to begin with and get familiar with the organization, I have a question for James. The first question is, what sparked the idea of Humanitix and what made you jump on board?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, thanks, John, for the intro, mate. I think you'd probably do a better job than I would at introducing Humanitix. So, mate, if you don't want to go into banking, come and yeah, look to work in the tech space. So yeah, just with Humanitix, there's some context to how it started first. So Humanitix was started coming up to about 5 years ago by my two co-founders, Josh Ross and Adam McCurdy. And so both were working in the corporate space. Josh worked as a partner at Watermark Hedge Fund as an analyst there, partner, and Adam was a tech consultant at Accenture. And so effectively both of them being like lifelong friends, you know, really sought out to build careers of purpose and wanted to contribute back to society and live a meaningful life, but also use your skills to contribute back. And so there was always ideas of, you know, building a business or doing something profound and impactful with your life and your career. And it sort of wasn't until 5 years ago that they then took the leap. Josh, at the time, was working at the hedge fund, and Adam and himself were actually trying to scope out ideas. And obviously social enterprise seemed to be the kind of resounding type of model that just makes a lot of sense for a few reasons. So obviously, if you've kind of looked in the space, if you've read or watched videos like, you know, what is it, like why the charity sector is dead, or what they have all wrong, but I think it was Dan Pink. I can send through the videos after this, but yeah, effectively touching on things like, you know, if you just treat the frontline causes and don't actually deal with systemic problems, you're forever actually having to then provide funding to those frontline causes. So if you're not kind of working upstream, and particularly if you kind of start a new charity, then you're also cannibalizing existing profits from the not-for-profit sector. So it's not like an unlimited, there aren't unlimited resources that are allocated to the not-for-profit sector, because, you know, if they were, you know, a lot of these problems would probably have been solved. And so they kind of started looking at social enterprise models, initially set out and thought maybe you could create like an alternative to Facebook, where, you know, obviously you're publishing content, the ad revenue that's generated from that could then go towards funding causes. But, you know, taking on Facebook is no easy task. And so one of the industries that actually popped up was events, and specifically events ticketing. And so, you know, we've all been to a gig where, or bought a ticket online to a gig or a festival where, you know, you get to the checkout process and you get slapped by an $8 or $10 booking fee for something that you have to print at home. And so, you know, as technology costs have decreased over the years, booking fees and these transaction costs have largely stayed the same. And so people don't actually have love for ticketing platforms. They pretty much resent them, but understand that it's a necessary evil in the industry. So that was one of the key reasons why ticketing was pretty fascinating. It has a network effect based on the types, based on just the way that events operate and communicating events, and the pricing models as well is pretty interesting. So event organizers are the ones that use the software, but the end customers, their ticket purchasers, are typically the ones that pay for it. So it creates a really interesting kind of B2B dynamic where you're obviously selling a product to an organizer, yet they're not actually the ones that are kind of typically paying for it. So for these reasons, the kind of ticketing just popped up as a really interesting model, and such that, you know, if you could provide a platform that exists that's better than you know, the rest of the market, and you can provide it at the same, if not a better rate, then it kind of just creates a bit of a no-brainer in terms of, you know, making a switch. So that was kind of the crux of initially kind of what sparked the idea, just looking at the sector, looking at these types of models, and then trying to apply it to an industry that there is really no love for. And in terms of, I guess, what made myself jump on board, I think I studied a double of comm and echo at UNSW, yeah, coming on maybe 7 years ago, and I was pretty jaded. I went and worked in finance briefly as a market analyst, trading FX products, and yeah, it's, for me, you know, coming out of uni, entering that job, you kind of hit that path in your life where you're trying to figure out, you know, what do I stand for, what I want in my life, what's the life that I want to create. And so I came out the back of that role, pretty burnt out and jaded, and went traveling, backpacking for 6 months in South America, where I took a lot of time to kind of figure out exactly that. So, you know, what is my moral framework? What do I want to be spending my time doing on this earth? And for me, what kept coming up was that, you know, by chance we're given access to, you know, food, water, shelter, community, and it's by pure chance that we're given these things. And so if you're not actively trying to use these gifts to then try and lessen the suffering of others in this world, then it's a little bit of a slap in the face to chance. And so I was reading a bunch of books at the time, you know, like Blake Mycosky's book on social enterprise, the founder of Tom's Shoes, like Daniel Flynn's book, Chapter 1, you know, philosophy books on Stoicism, and kind of really trying to figure out what I wanted to dedicate time and energy to. And what it sort of stuck on was social enterprise models. And so I actually, when I came back from that trip, I was dirt broke, moved back in with my folks, and ended up going to a social entrepreneurship event. And that's where I met Josh, and he was pitching Humanitix for the first time at this little shady event in Chinatown. And at the time, they were very much so just kicking off Humanitix with their first MVP. And you know, they were sharing a salary at the time and moved back with their parents as well. So got a bar job on the weekends to pay the bills, and just kind of slowly started to build. But yeah, to the point of like what made me jump on board. As soon as I heard the model, it made so much sense. Like, you're solving a pain point, you're creating impact, but it's through a scalable model. So it's kind of like the inner nerd in me that it really resonated with, versus, you know, the actual end impact, although the impact is obviously important and significant in itself.
Oh, thank you for sharing that story, James. Quite impactful. I guess the second question is in terms of strategies. So what strategies did Humanitix use to get off the ground in a competitive environment for ticket booking? Yeah,
I mean, there's great books in any case that, you know, it wasn't necessarily the backbone of what we did, but, you know, like The Lean Startup is a classic book where they're constantly speaking about, you know, trial stuff cheaply, validate your idea. And so I think that was just kind of inherent in the model, also just purely based on just not having the money to you know, throw 100 grand or whatever at an MVP to then give it a crack. So I think what was really effective is that, you know, initially we actually had two MVPs, so two basic products that we used in order to kind of test this idea to see whether it would actually resonate with organizers. So the first product was actually a licensed piece of software, so an existing ticketing provider. We white label, it was just a white label solution. We licensed it, paid a small fee. It wasn't about generating revenue, but it was about seeing whether this model would actually work. And so we're talking, it wasn't a self-service product. Like it was, you know, have organizers that were keen to run an event with us. They would send through an email with their description and maybe an image and their ticket price. And then, you know, on the back end, we'd then kind of build it and create it. And if they needed a full stop or they needed a space included, then they'd have to email us and send it through, and you know, we'd update. So it wasn't a scalable solution, but what it did allow us to do were a few key things. One is validate the idea, and we had a small group of about kind of 50, 60 event organizers that, you know, from things like just cold calling people to tell them what we're doing and this idea, it really resonated with. And so build up a little bit of a groundswell, being able to raise a little bit of money as in terms of philanthropic donations, to then kind of build out a second MVP, which the product and the types of features that we built in that MVP were as a direct result of the conversations that we're having with those original kind of 50, 60 event organizers. So, you know, the reality is like none of us had events backgrounds. You know, Josh worked in funds management, and as a tech consultant, and I worked in finance as well. So, you know, none of us had events backgrounds. We've been to gigs, but yeah, never run an event ourselves. And so it was a real learning experience on figuring out what do people actually need, what are their pain points, and how can we build solutions that are actually going to solve some of those pain points. So yeah, trial things cheaply and as quickly as possible in order to kind of see whether you've got a bit of a fit for your product would be kind of one of the key strategies. I guess following on from that, it's kind of a few key things that kind of tie into themselves is, you know, we had kind of incredible mentors and supporters along the way, but, you know, they didn't just raise their hand and say, yes, like you guys are awesome. Hey, take my donations, or here are my expertise. I want to help in whatever way possible. It actually required to really seek these people out and go for the bold ask. So, you know, connecting with people in the community, finding those that are ethically aligned, and having tons of conversations, both with event organizers as well as professionals, as well as corporates, anybody that, you know, this model would resonate with. And I think, you know, what you kind of find is when you are doing something that's for the betterment of society and the betterment of people, yeah, people are inherently good and want to contribute back, and they might not necessarily know how to contribute back. But if you reach out to them and ask for help, a lot of people are kind of willing to do so. So we've kind of had this great opportunity where, you know, what we do is you know, incredibly inspiring to other people because they can contribute their commercial skill sets, and it translates directly into specific impacts. So I think those kind of key things in terms of like finding a tribe, finding your people, you know, asking for help, and trialing things cheaply have been some of the nice little strategies we've been. Oh, and also, so just to add to that, just picking up the phone, like just speaking to organizers. You know, we would cold call hundreds of event organizers and find their details online and just have conversations. And we didn't have a sexy script, we didn't have a sexy product. You know, there wasn't any marketing collateral. It was just like a general chat about what we're doing, who they are, what they do, whether it would resonate with them, what they would need if they were to consider a switch. And those conversations just inform everything about your business, how to approach selling, how to approach your product. I think a lot of challenges that startups can run into is like the fear of, you know, picking up the phone and speaking to the end customer, when like the reality is they inform or should inform absolutely everything that you do.
Thanks for that. I guess the last question is more in terms of financials. How do you balance the cost of running a business with the social impact motives of Humanitix?
We've been, I'll give context on the model first and work back from that. So Humanitix is itself a registered charity with the ACNC, so the charity body here in Australia. And so as a registered charity, you have no shareholders. So with a typical, let's say it's like a typical tech company, what you do is you try and obviously raise some funding, you build up a bit of a customer base, you'd be able to then issue equity in order to get funding to then grow and invest and start to build your business, and you might have a few series of funding rounds that you close. So one of the biggest challenges that we faced as an organization was around access to funding, because we actually have to be funded purely through philanthropic donations. The challenge there is that the types of organizations or foundations that provide philanthropic donations are wanting to contribute to frontline causes. So they want to be donating to, specifically to girls' education on the front line, or to domestic violence shelters, or to, supporting, animals, animal welfare, for example. So it's not sexy to donate to a bunch of, guys based in the northern beaches, North Shore of Sydney, building a ticketing company. It's far from sexy. So eventually what we're able to do was get the attention of a few key partners that this model really resonated with. And so that was actually specifically in the forms of Google and Atlassian's foundations. And so what they allowed us to do, or the funding that they provided, allowed us to actually cover a lot of those initial costs of the setup and the building of the tech, which is kind of the biggest cost. And obviously there's maintenance costs and hosting and transaction costs, but the biggest cost is initially building the tech, or the chunk of tech, and then getting to the point where your business model is actually fully self-funding. So you're able to generate enough revenue to then cover your base operating costs, and then it's your profits that are left over that are then funding these causes. So to give context to our specific model, from day one, we actually decided to donate the greater of our profits, or 30% of our revenue, to the end project that our organizers chose. And the reason there is that, one, for complete transparency, two, it wouldn't make sense, given the huge cost associated with building tech, to say to our organizers that, hey, this is our model. We donate our profits to fund education for disadvantaged kids, but we're not yet profitable. We're probably not going to be profitable for about 5 years. So come on this journey with us. We'll donate the money in 5 years, and then we'll make a profit in 5 years, and then we'll donate the money. So it didn't make sense to structure it in that way. So to your point, in terms of balancing the costs of running a business, initially it required significant philanthropic funding from our partners. And then at scale, it's really just a matter of us covering our base operating costs to cover our staffing, hosting, still the product development to keep it pushing and moving forward and being competitive in the market. But then the profits that would otherwise be funding shareholder wealth would specifically be funding our education projects. So I think that, and on a little side note, I think, as I've said at the origin, when you kind of have a little bit of a startup background and you run off the sniff of an oily rag, we're pretty frugal. The team's incredibly frugal, and it's kind of funneled through over the years into our decision making and just how we spend money. So we don't have a big sexy tech office with awesome breakout rooms and VR headsets with everybody running around. It's pretty, we sublease off another charity in McMahon's Point, and we run pretty lean. So I think it wouldn't sit ethically with us that too well if we were kind of spending huge amounts of cash on those types of things in any case.
You spoke about scale, and I'd now like to move on to, I guess, the growth phase of Humanitix with this question. What do you think have been some of the key operational challenges in scaling up Humanitix?
To the last point, I think one, obviously the one of the biggest challenges was funding, obviously as the result of our philanthropic model. I think two, just the tech. So when we built our second MVP, it was built on WordPress with a bunch of plugins, and we had an external development crew do some kind of customizations with plugins. Now, WordPress can be an awesome site if you're building a basic e-commerce tool where you're kind of selling some merch and a few other key items. But if you're building a fully functional ticketing platform, it's not so great. So one of the challenges we had, this is kind of pre getting funding from Atlassian and a few philanthropists, was we were selling, I think on this MVP we sold close to $5 million in tickets in the first year, and it was getting to the point where the tech was breaking, so it couldn't handle the scale of the amount of clients who were actually running events on our platform. And so we kind of used to call it like blue shoes, and the reference was that there would be things that would just make no sense. So just a small tweak and change to a feature here would then affect something on completely the other end of the platform in a completely unrelated section. And so I think, and we can laugh about this now because we've built an awesome product now, but one of the things, we went live with one of our largest clients at the time, a client called Jackie Gillies, who was on The Real Housewives of Melbourne, a bit of a socialite. She's a clairvoyant, and her partner is actually Ben Gillies, who's the drummer from Silverchair. And they were running this event called Shine It Up, where she's obviously kind of a bit of a psychic medium, and we were really stoked. It was one of our biggest clients at the time, and it was about to go live. It was on our MVP. We'd never handled that much traffic before, and we're looking at the metrics as the number of hits started to creep up on our platform, and then it's slowly creeping and building and building and building. We thought we'd scaled effectively, and then straight away, like, everything goes down. Platform goes down, ticket sales stop, but it doesn't just go down for them, it goes down across the board. And so luckily we didn't have that many clients on our platform at the time, maybe 100 plus, 200. But yeah, I mean, these are the challenges with scale, is that if you haven't built a tech solution that can handle major influxes, and you don't have the funding behind you, you kind of run a fine line where you're kind of like trying to prove a concept in a lean way, but then also making sure that you don't damage your reputation in the industry, because it is so important. And so to kind of back that up as a kind of a most recent feel-good story, we actually went live with a festival in February, Strawberry Fields Festival, a techno festival down in Melbourne. And so they sold upwards of 8,000 tickets in the space of 30 seconds when they went live. Like 15 seconds, like all your tickets were selected in the process, and then within a few minutes everything was completely sold out. And so the platform barely hit any of the performance metrics. Like it was smooth sailing. So a very stark difference that a few years can create when you've actually really invested in your tech and your team. But yeah, these are, I guess it's just the classic startup story on like trying to find that balance between building the client base, getting the funding, not giving people a bad enough experience that they don't return. And Shine It Up, Jackie Gillies did return to work with us post that, so the relationship's not done. So from a technical perspective, I think that's a pretty good example. I think operationally, as you start out, if you haven't like tried to create a business from scratch before, which we haven't, you're kind of just figuring it out on the fly. So we'd be cold calling potential clients, we'd be like booking or making tasks or notes in our Gmail, in our calendars, and obviously that's not scalable. Like it's not possible to keep track of all that. So eventually we kind of incorporated CRM systems. We use HubSpot now, build out a lot of automation tools, and kind of train the team up on that. And obviously all the reporting and integrations and everything that kind of funnels into that. But we didn't start out to say, okay, great, 5 years from now, we're going to need this really slick CRM solution with all these triggers and emailing and contacts and all your data stored in the one key place. Like it's been just such an evolution, and something that you just constantly tweak and change as problems come up. You look for the solutions and you then invest the time when it's important.
Glad to hear that you didn't ruin the relationship with the Gillies. Just on moving on to, I guess, what has been probably a big problem for every startup, that's COVID-19. I can imagine that it probably had a really big impact on the events industry. How did Humanitix and how did the team navigate this challenge?
Yeah, pretty tough. You know, obviously the events industry got slammed. You know, when events can't operate, people are, you know, issuing refunds for all their events, they're cancelling their events. You know, we spent the first month probably in damage control, just supporting our clients as best we could. Obviously their businesses are being crippled. And so, yeah, we spent a bunch of our time just kind of being part counselors and part events ticketing people that are, you know, helping people reconcile and figure out where the businesses stand. So it was a tough year. We scaled back some of our team's hours, but we kept everybody on. And yeah, we kind of worked throughout. And you know, for those team members that were kind of like perhaps more outward bound facing in terms of sales roles, we're still doing sales, but we're also dedicating time to improving our customer experience or improving our processes. It was just a great opportunity internally to take stock, figuring out, you know, where are we getting stuck? If we were, you know, 2 times or 4 times, 5 times the size, what would be the issues that are existing? And let's maybe start to work on some of those things now that we've got some downtime. So we did that during COVID, and luckily, I mean, it's a bit of a silver lining for us because our major competitors globally were pretty exposed as well. And so we had a lot of our competitors that actually started scaling out of the market, reducing their support levels, reneging on contracts, which really left a bad taste in the mouths of event organizers here in Australia, but also abroad. So it actually allowed and gave us an opportunity to really start to step into the space, have conversations with clients that were perhaps under contracts with specific with specific event platforms. And yeah, it actually helped for us to be kind of constantly investing in our customer experience, not reducing our capacity, and then just being there for clients when they're kind of ready to get back on board and begin running events. So yeah, there's kind of a bit of a silver lining that came out of the mayhem.
I can imagine it was a tough year for everyone, but it's really cool that you guys kind of focused inwards there and look to improve how Humanitix kind of operates and presents itself. Moving on to what I think is a really big question for, I would say, all non-for-profits, especially the young people. Does Humanitix face any challenges sourcing, hiring, and retaining top talent?
I guess by this like top talent, I think perhaps you're touching on, yeah, like the not-for-profit sector typically underpays relative to the for-profit sector, and so yeah, you kind of have this challenge where, you know, you've got, you know, complex social problems that need solving, and then you're not drawing the best talent to solve those problems, or if you are, they're making a significant sacrifice financially in order to do so. So today we've actually been pretty lucky, and it kind of sits within our ethos that we're striving towards paying market rate for our salaries. So, you know, things like software development, like there's no way that you're going to get, or you'd be incredibly hard pressed to get software developers to come and work for you when they're in such high demand, and then take, you know, a 20% or 30% pay cut in order to do so. So for us, you know, we need the best talent. We're working or competing against, you know, some of the biggest tech companies that have access to the best talent. So for us, in terms of like remuneration, we focus on trying to obviously get as close to market rate as possible. I think it's a balance because, you know, we want to attract people that aren't just here for the money, but obviously realizing we're not fooling ourselves that money is an important part of life, and, you know, financial stability, and a key reason why people obviously take jobs. So in terms of actually sourcing, like when we are competitive in salaries, like it's actually not a massive challenge, because I think a lot of people do seek meaning in their lives and want to contribute back to something more meaningful than themselves. And so like the value prop in terms of, you know, working on an exciting project that has a serious opportunity to shift the needle, while developing your professional skills, while also, you know, contributing back to an amazing cause, I think it kind of ticks a lot of people's boxes. So in terms of retention, we've had like one person leave us to move back to Korea to support their family, but the rest of our team have stayed on since we started. So it's a really tight-knit crew, and yeah, people are incredibly engaged and intrinsically motivated by what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James, for sharing your vulnerability, highs and lows. It's pretty inspiring to hear. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.